Thank you all for joining. We're always glad to see folks. So I'm Lindsay Gleason. I'm the Assistant Director here at the Community Foundation, and third Thursdays are one of the things under my umbrella of work. So we put together workshops for nonprofit leaders, and nonprofit leaders, absolutely, the executive directors and CEOs are of course welcome, but anyone at your organization is welcome. We're about developing leaders, and it's not just aimed for folks at the top of an organization. So everyone's welcome. Even if you're not involved in a nonprofit and you're interested in the topic, please feel free to join and tell others. So today, as it was announced when you joined with the automated recording message, we're recording the session, so we'll post this on our website probably after Thanksgiving, but it'll be back as a resource on our website for you to go back to if you choose to. We have automated captions turned on for accessibility purposes, and those keep getting better and better. But you will notice that some of what it picks up is not accurate. But we turn those on for folks who are deaf or hard of hearing. And then also if you're in a space where you can't hear because it's loud or you can't have your sound on, it just helps make it a little bit easier for everyone. And then also if maybe English isn't your first language, it can also be helpful. So today, as with any session, please feel free to ask questions and add your thoughts throughout the presentation. I was telling Jess before we had this session that I know I'm not a fundraising expert, but with the experience that I've had and the experience that Jess and Laura have, if they want to jump in at any point, we have some observations to share about how you could approach planning for a whole year and incorporating fundraising campaigns. But we would love to hear your feedback as well. It's one of those things where you can constantly make changes to a process, right? Fundraising is always evolving. A couple quick reminders before we jump into the presentation. Our last third Thursday session of the year will be in person. And just as an FYI, third Thursday is the name of the program, but we're switching it up to second Thursday in December just to accommodate holiday closures and travel that we know folks have on the books. So we're hoping by moving to the 14th, we'll be able to gather with a few more people. So it'll be from 9 to 10 in Blacksburg at the Corporate Research Center, and you can get all the details by going to our website to sign up. It's going to be a networking session and brainstorming topics for 2024, and we just love to see you all and hear about your successes from this year and celebrate with you all. And I always like to plug our scholarship application. If you know anyone who's in school, if you're in school, we would love to have them apply, and you can learn more on our website. But high school seniors, folks already in college, trade, or technical school are eligible. If you're an older adult and you're returning to school, we have all kinds of scholarships available, and we would love to have applications. So please check that out or share it with folks you know.
Just a note on that, we don't fund graduate studies, but we do fund undergraduate.
Oh, thanks for that note, Laura. Yeah. All right. Well, if I could switch to the next slide. I love technology. Okay, there we go. All right, so today's agenda, we've had a few sessions this year focused on fundraising, and this one is building on our July meeting focused on annual giving. I definitely recommend you check it out if you haven't seen it, but certainly not necessary homework to go through this session today. But what we talked about there is thinking about the topic of annual giving, how you work with donors and make sure you're have regular communication with them. And so today's agenda topic is thinking about, well, how do you enact something like that? How do you incorporate that communication with your donors? And how do you manage this work on top of everything else you're doing? We know so many of you are small person shops, and wouldn't we all love a 5-person fundraising team to staff up and go out and do all this work? But we know it's, for many of us, including us at the foundation, it's one of the many hats we wear. So how do we incorporate this into everything else we're doing? So the first segment, I'll talk about what to think about when you're thinking about planning a fundraising campaign. What are some of the elements? And then we can talk about enacting a plan for the year. So for to kick things off, when you think about annual giving, you'll hear a lot from people, and we heard about this in our July session, and it's certainly been something I've heard a lot in my career, is it's small, consistent efforts. What can you do throughout the year that you make sure that your supporters are hearing from you, and they're hearing from you more than just for fundraising asks? So what are the different types of communications that you're already doing, and what are potentially some additional things you can do, or make sure the communications you're putting out are more regular? So a lot of things on this list you're probably already doing, right? So many of us have social media. A lot of us send letters for appeals, or send out emails, regular newsletters, have publications, events, you have meetings with folks. All these things are part of your cultivation efforts and stewardship efforts with your donors. So cultivating, thinking about learning more about your donor and what they're interested in, and potentially preparing for an ask. And that stewardship piece is thanking your donors and getting them more engaged in your work. So a lot of what you're already doing is probably hitting on some of these things. So when you're thinking about an annual giving campaign, it's about providing some structure and plan in place to make sure you're doing this regularly. In any communication with your donors, you want to consider your audience. So there's probably more groups than these three, but these are kind of the main three I was thinking about. You have your core supporters. These are your champions. A lot of times they're board members, they're volunteers, they know who you are, and they're excited about you. And you can probably count on their regular support in some way, right? Either they're donating their time or their talent. Sometimes they're making a gift, sometimes all three, but they're your folks who are really excited about you. And then maybe you have some donors but aren't extremely involved in your work. And this is maybe not quite annual giving, but thinking about how you might be able to bring your donors more into your work, and sharing those opportunities of, we know that you've given the past few years, you want to come in and volunteer with us. So offering other opportunities to engage folks. And those are some messages that you can put in your communications with donors. And then prospective donors. And in truth, everyone is a prospective donor. And I don't mean that in a cynical way of, seeing dollar signs when you look at people, but, you just never know who you're talking about and who might be impacted by the issue that you care about and are doing in your work. So just be prepared to share your mission and how people can get involved. And a lot of what we'll talk about today with fundraising is thinking about written communication. But of course, part of your fundraising is that in-person interaction, which can be pretty hard to beat when you're sharing your passion for your work in person. So what to include in messaging? And again, this is thinking about written communication, but certainly having some of these data points and stories to be able to share with folks as a part of your elevator speech or a deeper conversation with folks. It's always great to have a few of these things to be able to share off the top of your head. So I think what can be really powerful is having a mix of both data and stories, showing the breadth of the work that you're accomplishing. And what data can you potentially share from a year of work, a month, a quarter? Have you ever administered a survey where you've gotten feedback from, maybe you work with clients at a food bank, and your clients have said, hey, you keep sending us bananas and we don't like them, so we're switching to X. And so what can you share with donors to say, hey, we heard from our clients and they don't like X and we've changed it to Y. So there's probably things that you're already doing, things you're already collecting that you might be able to share with donors. But then also those personal stories of people who are impacted by your work. People give to other people, right? The data is so important to show that breadth, but then that depth of showing who's been impacted by your work. And if you have quotes from supporters or clients, having a third-party endorsement versus your team sharing about your work can be really powerful. Certainly, if your team is excited about your work, and you talk to anyone at the Community Foundation, and we get very excited about our work. But having a board member or a longtime donor talk about our work, or a grant recipient, can be sometimes even more powerful, right? So think about folks who might be able to help you provide some of these quotes, and what data you already have. Other things to include in messaging, when you're making a fundraising ask or launching some kind of campaign, being able to contextualize what the money will be used for. So are you using it for operating expenses? And we know that operating expenses and talking about that with donors isn't always the most exciting thing, but you can make that case of, hey, we have to keep the lights on and run our building and pay our staff to make sure this whole thing works. So there's ways to make a compelling case for that. And you can tell folks, this is what we're using it for. Or maybe you're funding a specific program or that's been there for a long time, or you're starting something new. You could be buying equipment or supplies. And anything where you can help a donor visualize what you're trying to do. You know, we all get inundated with information, and being able to give specifics to folks, I think really helps to be able to picture what you're talking about and what your goal is. And if you have the ability to share what would a specific donation do, you know, I think sometimes people are like, well, I can only give $5, $25. Is that really going to help? You might be able to give specific examples of what that $5 could represent or that 25 represents. But giving those examples, and then maybe you don't have that $5 example, but sharing, you know, collectively, this is the impact of what all of you are going to be able to do for us, and making it kind of, you know, that group goal that you're working toward to get people excited, and knowing that that smaller donation might not have as big as an impact as the larger one, but all of it together does something really special. Goal setting. So when you're thinking about a number for a fundraising campaign, it can be tricky. You know, it's the economy has been wild the past few years, right? Inflation. We're all paying more for everything that we're doing. A lot of people have increased need at their organization. So it's tricky to know what kind of goal you're going to be able to set and understand if you're going to have success, because it's volatile and you're not always sure what donors are going to do necessarily. So sometimes it's good to think about having an internal goal versus an external goal. So sometimes I like to think about of under promising and over delivering with an external goal. So maybe internally you're like, you know, if we were able to raise $10,000, that would be perfect for this particular program. But for this particular campaign at this time of year, we're not sure if we're going to get the same results as we did last year. Let's set a $6,000 goal and see what happens. And then if you go over that goal, to me, it always feels better to go over a smaller goal than under a larger goal. So that might just be me, but I think I think it's important to show that success for donors, and nothing wrong with a smaller goal than maybe you've had in the past. But speaking in the past, you know, looking at past data can help inform what you're doing. Certainly, you know, it depends year from year on how the economy is going and how donations have been coming in. But looking at what you've raised in previous years and what did you do with those funds? And are those examples of things that you can share with donors of this is what we've done with your money in the past if you're going to do something similar. And then, of course, you're thinking about your funding needs for the year. Do you have increased needs this year? What are your operating expenses? Do you have anything special to raise money for? Do you have certain goals around a certain percentage more you want to raise or more donors? These are all questions that can help inform how you set your goal and the time of year when you run your campaign. But then with all this, remember the ultimate goal is absolutely donations. They help run our organizations, right? It's what keeps our doors open, but you're also building relationships. You want to understand what your donors care about. You want to make sure that you're thanking them regularly, showing them that their donations have impact, and you want to inspire people with your work and hopefully create more ambassadors for your work. So you create a bigger network of folks to help move your mission along. So, you know, not too many things to think about when you're thinking about fundraising, right? But these are some of the things that you want to keep in mind when you're thinking about a specific fundraising campaign and planning out fundraising for the year. So I can pause there and ask if anyone has anything else to share or has any questions before I move into the next part of the presentation.
Lindsay, I'll jump in a little bit. I think this was all super helpful, and obviously the same thing we think about at the foundation as all of you do. A couple thoughts, and Lindsay will go into kind of thinking through the year and the sort of rhythm of your communication with donors. So is there a certain time of year they always hear from you? You know, for us at the foundation, when it comes to an ask, our donors tend to expect it around the Give Local Giving Day and, of course, end of year giving. But we're also touching base with them throughout the year, maybe with a monthly email or a quarterly update, or when they get our annual report. So we really think a lot about where are the touch points where not only are we doing it in the next year, but we can create a rhythm where they're going to anticipate that every year they're going to get our annual report at a certain time. And it's something that they hopefully look forward to and really take a look at and know that they are receiving that information regularly. And then the other thing I would say is just underscoring the relationship building aspect. I always say, and as Lindsay repeated, you never know who you're talking to or who you're working with. Some of our most, significant donors are folks who for years gave $50 now and then, or always attended, a third Thursday event or something out of curiosity. And years later, they're coming back and saying, I'm ready to start an endowment, or I want to fund a particular program. And I think they have just had that time to get to know us and see how we do what we do, and then feel more confident over time. So it's, cultivating those relationships at all levels and creating opportunities for folks to engage, that I think it's a long-term game. As much as we have annual goals that we set every year, a lot of times this is long-term thinking to build that base of donors. And then the final thing I'll add is that at least our experience at the foundation is our most significant contributions come via word of mouth. So folks create new funds with us because they know someone else who gives. So we do things like when I'm making a presentation to a Rotary Club, for example, I will make sure I'm switching out the photos in that presentation to include people that they may know, or nonprofits that Rotary Club likely is aware of. People give to other people and they want to be part of something. So if they see folks that they like and respect and know involved with your organization, that's an endorsement. And it's always nice to have that person, verbally endorse you, but you can also say, hey, this person was at our event and I'm showing you that via photo. So really thinking about how even in those small moments of presenting who you are and what you do, who is your audience and how are they going to relate and identify with who you are and who's involved with you, because that tends to be the best, at least for us, has always been the best endorsement we have, is recognizing other people that are involved and then going to talk to them. And if they have thought those donors have a good experience, they're going to tell other people about it.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jess. All right. And again, if folks have comments or questions, feel free to add them in the chat or unmute as I go through the presentation. So I'll just head into the next section, which is thinking about, okay, how do you put this plan into action? So planning out the year. So I'll share an example fundraising calendar. In this particular example, follows a calendar year and looks at each quarter and has prompts and thoughts for things that you can do each quarter. And it focuses on 2 campaigns for the year, GiveLocalNRV Giving Day in June and an end of year campaign. This happens to be the 2 major campaigns that the Community Foundation does for the year. And this, as I go through this, I hope it doesn't come off as too prescriptive of this is the answer for like the magic dust for making your fundraising work, right? These are just an example of how you could plan out a calendar. You might have other times of year when you have bigger needs, or it's a traditional time of year for your donors to give, and you can adjust for that. And I think one thing I'll add is I think many folks on the call are familiar with GiveLocalNRV, but just in case you're not, so that's the annual giving day that the Community Foundation runs, where nonprofit organizations can register, and collectively we all work throughout the month of June to fundraise and raise awareness for our mission. And one of the fun parts of that month, which all leads up to one particular 24-hour period, is you can compete for grants and prizes that the Community Foundation and our sponsors offer. So just to give you a little background on what we're talking about there. And so again, there could be, there's a lot of different ways to structure your fundraising calendar. So I'm hoping that this helps prompt ideas for what would work for your particular organization. So I broke it out into quarters. So thinking about, I can't believe we're midway through November. January will be here before we know it. I know probably a lot of you are in the middle of end of year campaigns right now. We're about to kick ours off. But we're gonna start in Q1 and go through the year. So I've broken up each quarter into thinking about what are some ways that you can be thanking your donors, what are ways that you can be engaging with them, and then either preparing to ask or asking them for donations. So with that thinking piece, if you're thinking about the beginning of the year, you may have received end of year donations. It's a really typical time of year for people to give. It's the giving season for a lot of people. And some people are trying to get in donations for tax purposes. There's all kinds of reasons why people are giving at the end of the year. So if you received end of year donations, share the collective total with your donors and make sure to remind them what they represents. Well, what it represents. And you'll hear me say this a lot in this presentation, and that's because in fundraising, repetition matters. It's okay to keep repeating your message. You're trying to repeat it in different ways and maybe different stories and different data. But a lot of it is reminding people of the work that you do, because everyone is really busy. This work is top of mind for you, and it might be top of mind for some of your closest champions, but even your champions get busy, right? So you want to remind people, hey, this is what we all did together collectively. And you know, January is also, or early time of year, is also a great time to reflect on the whole past year, right? And say, this is what we accomplished in 2023, 2022, whatever. This is what we want to do this year. So that's the engaging piece. Share with your donors what you're excited about for this year, and think about how you can engage with your work. So are you launching a new program? Do you need more volunteers? Do you have a new part of your work that you're working on? What's going on in your organization that you're excited about and you're looking forward to this year, and how can your supporters plug in? And then preparing to ask. So Give Local is in June, and it's never too early to be planning for any kind of fundraising campaign. But Give Local is a fun one. Because you have, your fundraising page online. You can do all kinds of things there. You can have a matching donor. You can have sponsorships. So if you want to do something like that, it's certainly not mission critical to have either of those things to be successful with Give Local. But now is a good time in that January through March period to think about, if you do want to reach out to sponsors, reach out to them early. And people love to give, but you got to get to them early, right? Because you only have so much of a budget often. And then, do you have any donors who might want to provide a match? That can be exciting to folks. So a match as low as $300 can be interesting to donors, and just showing that someone else has is putting up some money and encouraging others to give, it is incentivizing to folks. So do you have someone who's given maybe a few $100s in the past or more, who might be interested in providing that match to motivate other donors? So now that period, that first quarter, is a really good time to be thinking about those pieces. And during this period, so for each quarter, I have some dates at the bottom. for you to keep in mind. Registration for 2024 Giving Day will open on February 15th. And if you've been around for a while, you'll notice that that's a little bit later than we've done it in the past. And the reason for that is we've noticed some staff and volunteer turnover when we open the application to join us, or registration rather, and we want to make sure that our list is maybe a bit more up to date than if we opened it in December or January, and have that open in mid-February. So that is actually our third Thursday date, and we'll kick off and talk about all things Give Local on that third Thursday. And as an incentive to register early, if you register by the end of March, you'll be eligible for a $500 grant. Everyone who registers in that time period will be put into a pool, and we'll draw names. So hopefully that's a bit of an incentive to register early. So moving on to the second quarter, April through June. So again, that thanking piece. And it can be simple as, what are some of your successes from the first quarter of the year that you want to share with your donors, and sharing with them, thank you so much for making this possible. And some of the ways that you can thank folks, does it have to be a personalized email to every donor? No. Could it be a social media post? Could it be part of a regular newsletter that you send out? What are some things that you can put in your back pocket when you're meeting with donors and having coffee, or joining folks at your regular board meeting? What are you sharing with your board members? So there are a lot of different ways to share those successes, and reminding them that they're a part of it. And even if they didn't give in that last quarter, their collective impact helps fuel your work, right? The engaging piece, let your supporters know that you'll be participating in Give Local early. So if you send out that newsletter, let them know in your April newsletter or your May newsletter, hey, we're participating. You can save the date out on your social media, hang a flyer in your office, and think about, with Give Local, a lot of organizations will have some kind of in-person event. So maybe an open house or a percentage night at a local restaurant or brewery. Again, these are things that you don't have to do, but they're things that you'd want to think about, maybe in the April, May time period, maybe April if you're planning an event just to get things rolling. But that's a good time to be thinking about it. And then this is all about preparing for that ask in June. So this is one of your fundraising campaigns for the year. You set your goals, and early giving for this event opens June 1. Donors are encouraged to give online via the Give Local platform, but things like cash, checks, wire transfers also count towards your totals. So these are all things to keep in mind as you're doing some prep for this campaign. And then the Giving Day, which will be our 11th annual Giving Day, will be noon to noon Wednesday. It will kick off at noon on Wednesday, June 26th, and end at noon Thursday, June 27th. So hopefully these dates will help you start planning, even though registration isn't open yet. And during this quarter, this is a busy time of year at the Community Foundation, although I don't know when we're not busy, probably like all of you, it's constant, right? We also open our responsive grant application at the end of May. If you're not familiar with that application, it provides up to $4,000 in operating supports to nonprofits who serve the New River Valley, and we would love to have you apply. So that one isn't specific about your fundraising campaign, although it certainly could help with your fundraising totals if you receive a grant. But just to keep in mind that also pops up in the middle of this quarter.
Lindsay, could I add something in to this quarter? So I feel like, we're we're obviously think that everybody should be involved in Give Local because it's fun and hopefully you raise tons of money. So with that in mind, we often kind of hear people saying, well, sort of how much is too much when it comes to like sending a solicitation email or posting online. And I think what is nice about June is the giving day period, and then December is the end of year, is we've sort of all collectively agreed as a community that we're going to be inundated with asks because that's what happens at this time of year, right? So I would say, you know, don't be afraid to kind of schedule regular solicitations during that time period related to Give Local. It sort of creates this permission structure that's like, yeah, it's Give Local. Everybody is going to be asking for contributions as part of the giving day. So we encourage you to use that to your advantage, but also to think about what, as you know, let's say you're going to send 6 emails out during the month of June. It's not going to be the same 6 emails, right? So what, as part of that messaging, are you going to put in? Are you going to kick things off? Are you going to give updates on how close you are to your goal? Are you going to share a story about what what Give Local is going to be enable you to do that's different every time, so that they may expect that they're going to get that solicitation or that social media post, but the content is kind of building on itself. But I think, really kind of utilizing the times of year that our community is just used to being asked for money, whether it's at the end of the year or in our case for the giving day is hopefully an opportunity to not feel, and we say this to our board members as well, like it's the giving day, right? Like, of course you're going to go ask for money. It's the giving day, like we're giving you this permission structure to do that. And I think it's helpful to kind of think of it in that way so that you're not apologizing for asking people for money, right? It's not something you should do anyway, but it's certainly easier during these time periods.
For sure. Thanks, Jess. All right, so Q3, Give Local is over. We can all breathe a sigh of relief, and then we all launch back into our regularly scheduled programming. So again, you'll see the repetition here. You had a campaign and you're going to thank people. You're going to share your fundraising success. Don't assume that people went back to your fundraising page to check your final total. Let them know via email, for folks who donated or even folks who didn't. Just let them know, hey, this is what we were able to do this year. Thank you all for your support. If you shared on social media, if you were able to give, if you were able to come to an event, and again, share what that money will be used for. A way to engage some of your closer supporters in this time period, and this is true of after any campaign, you could potentially ask folks to write personalized thank you notes for donations. Now, if you have 500 donations, that's amazing, and we're excited for you. This might not be feasible, right? But could you have folks sign their name and write a thank you on a letter? Potentially. So this could work for folks with not a huge amount of donations. Maybe it's not a perfect fit for folks with a lot of those. But maybe if you do have a lot of donations, you could do a short video of your supporters saying thank you, and this is how you've impacted us. So there's a lot of different ways to get your message out, and probably I've emphasized a lot of written communication here in various platforms, but certainly there's a lot of different ways to get out your message.
And then I'm going to interrupt you again, Lindsay, just because
go for it.
That's evidently what I'm doing this morning. One thing, so the personalized thank you, we do that for the campaign we run as part of Give Local, and we have board members come in that day and do personalized thank you notes. One of the things that I think is a little bit of extra work for the staff, but well worth it, is like when we're printing the list of who they write to, we put notes about each person. So like my mom always gives during the giving day. So I always put a little thing in there that's like, this is Jess's mom. And my mom has every thank you note that has ever been written to her from the board because they're personal, right? And same thing if there's a former board member or a longtime donor. So like little notes about adding a staff, okay, here's who this person is. Or, you know, sometimes we have other nonprofit leaders we've worked with for years who will give us, you know, $25 as part of the giving day. And we put that in there, like this person leads this organization. And it really allows the board members to write something much more targeted and personalized. And I think that's sort of time well worth spending to make sure that those donors feel like they're not just getting the standard, right? Like there's the handwritten thank you note is wonderful in general, but if it's personal, that is just like 10 times better. So I would just strongly encourage, if it's a manageable number of people, to really be thinking about what's that person's relationship to your organization that can be acknowledged in the message.
Yeah, for sure, Jess. And I definitely have thank you notes that I've received from organizations of when people just did that extra touch of personalizing it, and it is really meaningful. I agree. And you're signaling to your donors like, hey, we noticed this and we want to specifically talk to you about it. And again, with all the information that all of us receive, something like that can set your work apart from maybe another type of thank you note. So in this stage, maybe you're not necessarily going out and soliciting donations, but you know, you certainly won't turn anyone down. So it's more of a preparing to ask stage. And this is a good time to look at your donors from the Give Local campaign. Are there any new faces in there of folks you don't know? Is it possible to ask them to get coffee or to visit your space to come for you to learn more about them and for them to learn more about you? Same thing with repeat donors who maybe gave more than usual. Kind of look at that list, and do you have to do this with everyone on the list? No. If you had the time for that, again, that would be wonderful. But could you pick out a few folks? Could you rope in some of your board members to say, hey, you want to reach out to this person? Or, hey, could you take a look at this list? Do you know anyone on here that we don't know these names? And kind of crowdsource that and think about a strategy of engaging a few folks. Or could you invite a group to come visit your space? Like maybe send a note to all those donors and say, hey, we're going to have a tour of our space. You're all welcome. This is the time. There's a lot of different ways to kind of bring people in and bring them a bit closer to your work. And during this time, the application for our responsive grant, which I mentioned earlier, will close mid-July. So, you know, no rest for the weary. Give Local, 4th of July, and then bam, the application closes. And we always mention this when we talk about our application. If you get your application in early, we love that because we can catch a potential error. Say you uploaded the same document twice, and that would kick you out of the process, which we hate. But if you do it early, we can give you a call and say, hey, did you, we're going to send this back to you. Can you upload X? You uploaded Y. So if you get those in early, we have time to catch potential errors, which are so easy to do, right? We're all doing a million things, but we want to make sure we see your application, the committee sees it. So we're cruising into the last quarter of the year, and as the year winds down, as we all know, we're in the middle of it right now. You'll have those additional data and stories to tell, and how can you share that information creatively? And that's not a prompt just for this time of year, right? I think what came from that is I was putting together some videos for our end of year campaign, and that's what made me put in this question. But that's sharing your information creatively is an any time of year thing. But it's just nice to have particularly at a time of year when it's really busy and a lot of organizations are asking for money. Is there a way to kind of help stand out from the crowd? So it might be worth the effort to stand out that way. Is there some kind of photo story that you can tell on social media or on your website? Can you nab a couple people to interview? And one thing I'll add on the video piece, and the photo piece of trying to capture photo and video throughout the year is challenging, but if you have events or other regular activities where you can kind of go in and pan your camera and take a short clip of video, that could be part of your library to put together for an end of year video. And then that engaging piece. does an end of year gathering make sense for your organization? You know, taking advantage of this time of year of so many people are reflecting on the year and gathering to celebrate. Could you also plug into that? And of course, that can be tricky, right? Like, are you adding to the other million things that people are doing? And so it might not be an event where you plan to have 500 people, but is it a smaller gathering of some of your closest supporters to get together and celebrate? Trying to find the perfect date is tricky. So this is the kind of thing where you might just have to iterate and have that iterative process of, we tried something this year, it worked okay, we're going to tweak it for next year, move it to another month next year, and so forth. But that kind of goes for all of fundraising, right? You try something and see if it works, and then try to learn and tweak it for the next year. And then that asking piece, again, just as Jess mentioned, many donors are used to the cadence of this time of year. So there's Giving Tuesday, which I imagine many of you are familiar with, but in case anyone isn't, that's a global day of giving. It always follows, it's the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So it's Thanksgiving, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, and then Giving Tuesday. And part of me is like, can we move Giving Tuesday to before Thanksgiving when everyone still has the money in their bank account, and maybe do it then, before Black Friday and Cyber Monday? But alas, I'm not in charge. But you know, that comes around every time of year, and jumping in on that, maybe you launch your campaign that week for your end of year appeal, or maybe it's the week before during Thanksgiving, and use the last 5 or 6 weeks of the year to send out those regular communication of this is what we're fundraising for, and these are some milestones we want to talk about. Hey, we're halfway through the campaign and we've raised 40% of our goal. Can you help us get there? And so forth. And it is a typical thing that people are doing this time of year, and joining in could potentially be a natural thing for your organization to do. And saving the dates. So Giving Tuesday next year will be December 3rd. And then the last day of the year is also a Tuesday. And so trying to figure out a plan. Maybe your office is closed that time of year, but if you could you have someone checking messages or have a particular email in case a donor calls at the last minute and wants to give you that big gift, that call we're all waiting for, right? So that's kind of an example year. Again, hopefully these are meant to be, these ideas are getting you thinking about what you could potentially do. But just keep in mind that fundraising takes time and it takes practice, and sometimes you do everything possible and you just don't hit your goal. But remember to celebrate your wins. Any donations that are coming into your organization are wins. And it's important. Maybe you didn't get to that $5,000 goal, but you raised $2,200, and that's going to make an impact on your work. And taking some time to evaluate your efforts in any fundraising campaign and making tweaks to your next campaign will hopefully just make it better. So that's all I have to share today. I can stop sharing my screen and see if folks have any comments or things they want to add, or questions. But thanks to everyone for joining today.
Lindsay, I'll add in one more thing too. This was really helpful. As you're thinking about end of year giving, hopefully you're familiar, but if you're not, if you have donors who are older, so I believe it's 72 or above, they have to do a required minimum distribution from their IRA. And that means they've got to take money out of their IRA every year. But for some donors, they don't necessarily need that money as income. So they can do what's called a charitable rollover, meaning that they can take what they need to get out of their IRA and give it directly to a nonprofit organization. It's not tax deductible to them, but because they don't receive that income, it's not taxed. So it's really a valuable tool. But you have to be thinking about that early enough so that they can get to their financial advisor to do it. So you can, if you just Google IRA charitable rollover, I think we may have some stuff on our website too, but if you have some older longtime donors, it is a really useful tool and oftentimes can be more sizable gifts than they might be able to give otherwise. So just thinking about some of those things that may require a little bit more lead time, but are really easy contributions for folks to make. And you can always email us with questions, but those things are gold. So they're definitely good to do those. I don't know if other folks here have some suggestions of things that have worked well for them as well, which we'd love to hear too.
Maybe not on same topic, Jessica, but I'd like to visit with y'all because when we raise money for camp, it's over months and it comes in so slowly. And I'll give you an example. When we raise funds to support our annual 4-H Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner food basket kits, it comes in the masses in 2 weeks. So I'd love to visit with you to kind of understand people's thoughts as to, yeah, the Thanksgiving and Christmas dinner food baskets are feeding families with kids. However, on the flip side, I'd love to send more than 30 kids to camp through sponsors. So I'd like to visit with y'all to understand thinkings and what's the difference. So
yeah, sure.
That's one of my main challenges. You know, we're a little different than some organizations. I have to raise all the funds to support our programming. So, you know, that's a large task. And part of that is I'd love to get more kids involved in our programs, but it's difficult to get people to, I don't know, we can visit sometime.
Yeah.
Think on that. And, you know, I'll reach out to see when y'all could perhaps catch up with me.
Yeah, absolutely, Chris. And your comment though made me think about one thing that we didn't necessarily cover here, but is important to think about is recurring giving, like monthly contributions. So, and that is a good way to try to smooth out some of those, you know, crazy times a year where you're having to push for major contributions. It's not an end all be all by any means, but oftentimes it's a way for folks to maybe give more than they would otherwise give because they're doing it in smaller increments over time. And if you have a profile on the Give Local page, you can encourage folks to give monthly. That's one of the options that is available as a recurring donation. So it's a nice way. Obviously, it's reliable. It's a nice way for folks to be able to give. And again, it can be a way to kind of smooth out some of those times of year that are, you know, a little bit more intensive. And you know, as a way to do it. So that might be something, and we can maybe, you know, talk more about that as well. But that's a tool we've been trying to expand here for sure over time, just to have a more reliable funding source.
That's right, Jess. And really, $10 or $20 a month doesn't really hurt that much. That's just a couple Starbucks visits a month.
For sure. Any other thoughts to share or questions?
Lindsay, can you refresh my memory? We've been a recipient of your responsive grant to help support 4-H camp and all the funding options that we have to put into it on the front end. Refresh my memory as to, you know, if I write that grant again, what does it have to be for? Yeah,
so and Laura can talk more in depth, but those grants are for operating support. So it's about what are your priorities and needs for that year and trying to make the money as flexible as possible. So we moved away from programmatic support, which we know can be super useful for folks, but sometimes it kind of pigeonhole and restrict the money. And the goal is to make the money flexible for you. So I don't know if Laura has anything else to add there, but.
Yeah, it's definitely for operating monies, and be thinking about your challenges and how you're going to mitigate those challenges for that grant application.
Yeah, exactly.
So I could tell you it costs anywhere. Well, we've been fortunate because my colleague in Patrick County has had a huge grant and she's paid for pretty much everything. But, now we're coming out of those times. So, could we use that to support programming for supplies, t-shirts for tie-dye, the tie-dye equipment, all the
We don't
resources
care.
our volunteers need?
Mhm.
Yep, we don't
Okay.
care.
Yep,
Well,
yeah,
I didn't,
Doors
I'm
open.
just,
Keep the kids in camp.
yeah, I
well,
think,
we look for ways to knock, price off the registration fee,
Right.
so we had a donor support us and buy all of our camp t-shirts. And while it's not a lot, that was $5 off that we knocked off. And so I'm just trying to figure out, how do I take $3,000 to $4,000 off my operating costs for camp? Because that's our biggest money. I wouldn't say money pit, but that's where we have to put a lot of resources. And it's hard to get people, honestly, to give money for 4-H camp. And it's just a wonderful resource, but thank you. I will definitely keep that in mind. I'm writing notes.
yeah, it is completely unrestricted. So you can use it for programs if you want to. It's not like we're requiring you to only use it to pay for your rent or something like that. It's meant to be general money and, that unrestricted support. So whatever that is going to be most useful to you is how we
I
want.
like it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Okay.
reach out to me in July, Chris. We need to work on those financials so that it's not such a big financial picture you're giving us. We gotta narrow that thing down.
Yeah.
Well, I know, and you've always been good over the years. And one of you said, submit early because that helps us reach out earlier, just to
Mhm.
say, hey. So for those of you who haven't benefited from some of their grants or just any of their programs, these ladies are great.
Chris.
Hey, thanks, Chris. All right, everyone. Well, we're about to hit the 10 o'clock hour and just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I hope it was helpful. And always glad to have coffee or to chat with you all, to learn more about your work or to ideate with you on fundraising.